Back. Well, thank you so much for having me. It is a great honor to be here, which is so ironic because for so long the story that brings me here was a source of shame for me. Can I just get a quick show of hands? I'd like to know, this is not a quiz, I'd just like to know how many of y'all have read my book so I can know. Oh, okay. Okay, good. Well, I'm going to beg the indulgence of those of you who've read the book because I'm going to go over some sort of familiar territory. Somebody who hadn't read my book was interviewing me the other day and said, I understand that you grew up of modest means. I said, oh honey, there was nothing modest about it. We were poor. We weren't even poor, we were po. We couldn't afford the last OR of poor. We were po. But, you know, I will confess to you that when I sat down to write The Glass Castle, I was completely convinced that once people knew the truth about me, that I was going to lose everything, that I was going to lose my job, I was going to lose all my friends, all of my family, that people would throw rocks at me as soon as I came into a room. I have never been so wrong about anything in my life. I've never been so happy to be wrong, but I think that I underestimated people. I underestimated their goodness and their kindness and their compassion and their willingness to root for a kid from the wrong side of the tracks as long as I was willing to be honest about my truth. About my story, but I think that moreover, in the isolation of my shame, I think I underestimated the degree to which everyone has something. And that has been the great gift that readers have given me in exchange for coming clean about my own story. And I think the third thing that I underestimated is how much people like reading about a story where parents are even worse than their own. They say, man, I thought my parents were bad, yours, woo! But my story begins, you know, I write about celebrities for my day job. It's tragic but true. That's what I do for a living. I cover celebrities. And my story begins, I was going to some fabulous party. And I was stuck in traffic a couple of blocks away from the party where I was heading. And I glanced out the window and I saw a homeless woman rooting through the trash. And to your average New Yorker, she just looked like your run-of-the-mill homeless woman. But in fact, it was my mother. And to my eternal shame, the emotion that seized me at that moment was not one of compassion or even sympathy, but it was fear. I was afraid that Mom would look up and would spot me and would call out my name. And somebody who was going to the same fabulous party where I was heading would hear her. And my secret would be out that while I was living on Park Avenue, writing about celebrities and wearing fancy designer clothes, my mother was living on the street. So, and I'm ashamed to admit this right now, but I slid down in the back of the taxi and asked the driver to take me home. Once I got home, I paced around the apartment and I glanced into the mirror and didn't much like see the hypocrite that was looking back at me. And I figured I had to do something. So I got together with my mother a couple of days later and I said, Mom, what am I supposed to tell people when they ask me about you? And she looked at me as though I just asked her the silliest question in the world and she said, tell them the truth. Just tell them the truth. And I thought, how can I possibly explain to people why my mother, who's an intelligent, resourceful woman, would be living on the street, but moreover, what kind of monster would live on Park Avenue while her mother is living on the street. But at the same time, I felt that I had to tell the truth. I've been living a lie for so long. I've been living I've been living in shame and denial for so long that I had to sit down and tell the truth. But as I said, there was no doubt in my mind that once I did tell the truth, that I was going to lose everything. I was going to lose everything that I've worked so hard all these years to set up, which was really nothing more than an elaborate facade, but it was what I had. But I felt at a certain point I did have to sit down and just tell the truth like Mom challenged me to. So I sat down and wrote The Glass Castle. And as I was writing it, I was thinking, nobody's going to understand this. Nobody's going to get this. And I have never been so wrong about anything. The great gift that readers have given me in exchange for coming clean about my past is that they come up and tell me their own stories. They tell me, you know, look, the details of our lives are very different, but we have a lot in common. And, you know, sometimes there are people with hard scrabble backgrounds like my own, and sometimes there are people with very privileged backgrounds who grew up on Fifth Avenue, who went off to fancy boarding schools, and they'll tell me the details of their lives. And the great realization that I've had since my book has come out is how much we all have in common. How shame is such an isolating emotion, and so often we live in the isolation of our own shame and think that these things happen to us because we are who we are, or because we're somehow less of a person, somehow because bad things happen to us, we're a bad person. And I think that having come clean about my own story, one of the many things that it has taught me is, you can't change your past, but you can change how you feel about it. You can change your future. As I was writing my book, I thought, and preparing to be embarrassed and humiliated, I thought, if one rich kid reads this, if one of the kids who, when I was growing up, made fun of me, that kind of kid who threw rocks at me and wouldn't have anything to do with me because I was sort of shabby and smelled a tad funky, if one kid reads this book and understands what it's like to grow up poor, then my job is more than served. And then when I was working on it a little bit more, I thought, if somebody who grew up like me reads it and understands what it's like to grow up poor and change your life, then that would be even better. Now that first wish came true not that long after the book was published. A friend gave the book to a friend who gave it to a cheerleader, a very popular girl in school. And she came up to her mother while they were on vacation in the Caribbean or something. She had tears running down her face. And she said, "Mom, there's this girl in my class whose hair is greasy, who always wears the same clothes, and we all make fun of her. Now I understand. And I will never make fun of her." And I thought, the Lord can just strike me with lightning right now because I've done my job on this planet. If one person now understands what it's like to be in a different circumstance, to me, that's what reading is all about.